Yeah, my big build-up coming.
Big build-up.
My eye was caught by an article in the Chronicle the other day. Ladies enjoy Irish bingo. No, sorry, no, it was the one alongside it. Prison talk is so arresting. So, fresh from his triumph at the Hensford Probers Club, I bring you our very own Steve.
Thank you very much. Right. Good evening, my name's Steve Gill. I'm a Londoner. I do apologise for that. Mum and Dad, Flo and Stan Gill. Flo was a Cockney and Dad was a North Londoner. I suppose his only claim to fame is he was in the same class as just that comedian guy who was a bit gay in the early days. Kenneth Williams. Yeah. So anyway, that's a good start, isn't it? Anyway, I taught for the last 12 years of my working life IT and maths at HMP Stafford, and I went on to some other ones as well, some other prisons as well, Featherstone and women's prisons over at Eccleshall and places like that. But whilst I was at Stafford Prison, they have a very big book called The Tome. It's about so big. It's been on view in the Shire Hall, which is now closed, and it's been in the High House in Stafford. It's completely copperplate writing. It's beautiful, and it tells of every execution, with the exception of a few early ones, in Stafford Jail. And I was mesmerised with it. I really was, and that's what started all this off. Okay, so that's Stafford Jail. Can I have some lights down at the front here, just to darken it up a bit here? Sorry. Cheers. So that's. I don't know why that keeps right there. Why does that keep right? Anyway, that's the front of Stafford Jail. You can see the razor wire above the. See the razor wire above the wall? If you look at the people, you can see that the wall around the outside of it ranges from about 18 to 20 feet. So that's about 5, 6, 6.5 metres, something like that. There was an escape there back in 2004. The guys climbed over the wall oh my goodness, come back to me. About that position there. They ran over Jail Road. This is Jail Road leading into Stafford Town at the end there. They ran into Sainsbury's car park, hijacked a car, 3 of them drove away. They were real geniuses, these guys. 2 of them were found next day at their mum and dad's homes in Castle Douglas and King's Standing. But the 3rd guy, the prime mover of it all, a bloke called Anthony Harben, he wanders around the country a bit, and he eventually settled with an assumed name from somebody he got off a gravestone, and he carried on his life as that. He married a lady, they had a child, he got a job at a boatyard in Poole in Dorset, and he used to send a Christmas card to the governor, the lady governor, he sent 4 of them, so 2004 to 2008. But by the time they'd got to some of them, they knew more or less where he was. And sure enough, he arrived at the boatyard one Monday morning, and the men in blue were ready to pick him up and bring him back. The irony of it is, he only had 6 months to do, and he got 9 years for escape. So, was it worth it? Anyway, that's sort of a bit of light heart just to start it off. What other things am I going to show you on here? So this is the autoclave where the vehicles can come in. There's another gate at the back, which I'll show you a little bit more about later. You've got the main entrance that I used to go into, to pick my keys up to walk around the jail. This is the visitors' entrance. Behind there, it's a bit like an airport. You put your bags, it goes through on a conveyor belt. They can see if there's any contraband in your bags, and they can frisk you and put you through the bar that goes over and everything like that. So that really shows about that much, I think. Yeah, let's move on. So, and how to get there? Well, that's a little bit sort of vague, really. It's really the legal or illegal way to get there that I'm going to talk about, not where it is and how to get there by bus or anything like that. Just a few things about incarceration figures. In 2017, Amnesty International said there was, I don't know why this thing keeps moving. Anyway, Amnesty International said there was around 10 million people in prison. That figure's probably gone up now to about nearly 12 maybe, and an estimated third of them haven't yet had a trial. That's worldwide, right? And they can't prove those figures, but that's some sort of an estimate. What I can tell you is, as of last Friday, these were the latest figures that were issued in the UK. So we locked up last Friday 79,679 people, and that's been audited by the Howard League of Penal Reform, issued by the Ministry of Justice. In Scotland, the Scottish prison system say there are 7,503, and in Northern Ireland they only issue their figures quarterly. There's around about 1,900. So you can see, when that figure in total gets to about 95,000, that's when problems arise within the prison system, and they have to think about ingenious ways of trying to lower it. But that's a political decision rather than a legal situation. In the British court system, today we don't have a unified legal system. And I think for 2022, that's absolutely disgusting. But still, England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland all have different laws and varied procedures. Wow. And it costs a fortune. In fact, if you're found guilty in Scotland, you'll probably get a slightly higher sentence, and that's been proved. It all started with Henry II. He was the first King of England that we had that decided on a framework for a legal system. He was the first Plantagenet, so we had William the Conqueror, the Normans came over, there was a few kings there, and then Stephen died, and there wasn't a natural direct heir, and Henry II, Henry Plantagenet of Anjou, he became. And he was quite good for this legal work, because he put a lot of things in operation. He started with a guy called Randolpho de Granville. Granville, as this text is called, was a scholar, and with a few of his scholarly mates, they formed the first common law book for law in this country. And much of the law, common law that we have today, is directly from that book. Might have been adjusted a bit along the way, but that was the start. And with that, he brought in a jury system. 12 good men and true would then decide on a court case, and what was going to be the event of happening, the judge would make it forward. But he was the person that started it all those years ago, back in the mid-1150s. He also commissioned Newgate Prison in London. You know it today as the Old Bailey, the Central Criminal Court, but he was the first person to put it forward. He also brought through what they call general heirs, E-Y-R-E, and a general heir was the first court circuit judges, and they would be based for this area in Oxford, and they would go around the Midlands region and they would dish out whatever sentences according to Glanville's common law book was required. We move on a few years, not too many, Edward I, Edward II, so within the next 100 years we started to get assizes. So these court judges would not only go round, but they would all go round at set points through the year, and they would adjudicate on batches of cases, of serious cases. And all the assizes for Staffordshire were held in the Shire Hall. Now we've had 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or more of those, but this is the latest one. The picture in the top left corner is in the 50s when it was all gardens in front. Anybody remember that? No? Okay, that's as it was. That's a bit as it is now. The only difference is that the gates are locked because Shire Hall has been closed for nearly 2-3 years now, and they're actually doing some refurbishment work on it at the moment, and they're going to open it up. I don't know what as, but that's the idea anyway. It is a beautiful building inside. The court, which is inside, where the assize was held, was refurbed about 3 or 4 years ago, and it is beautiful. It really is. I'm going to leave Stafford, and the reason I've put this is because I got the booklet that you sent out in the post this morning, and it included on the front a picture of Lichfield Cathedral. So I thought, right, we'll put this bit in. Lichfield Cathedral, during the Tudor period, played a very, very balancing act with the way in which the kings and the religions were being moved and transferred. So before Henry VIII, the chief religion of the country was Catholic. Henry VIII came along, and because of his marital problems, he developed the Church of England. His son, Edward VI, carried that on, and at that time the leaning at Lichfield Cathedral was leaning a little bit towards Church of England. But when Edward VI died, and it was possible that Mary was going to come back, whose mother was Catherine of Aragon and who was a Catholic, and she wanted to promote the Catholic cause, then Lichfield Cathedral stood back up again and started to go towards more the Catholic way of thoughts. Now, because Queen Mary knew this and she thought this was a good idea, she granted county status to the city of Lichfield. Only 5.41 square metres, separate from Staffordshire, right? And that remained so until 1888. Over 300 years, Lichfield was a county on its own, and that's why we have it, because it was bestowed its own sheriff. It had a separate legal system, administration, in the Guild Hall, and that's rebuilt a few times as well. But upstairs in the Guild Hall, you've got the assize court, and down below you've got the holding cells, and it was incorporated again under the Oxford Circuit for the movement of these judges that were going around. The assize was held as necessary, and they didn't have too many cases. Miscreants were either burnt at the stake in the Market Square or hung at Gallows Field off London Road. So, you've seen those plaques, I'm sure, on the side of St Mary's Church in the Market Square, and these were just after Mary came to the throne. And this is, so you've got Lichfield at the top, and where the Shell garage is, where it branches off to Tamworth, and then London Road branching off towards Borough. They're redoing up the canal at the moment, and behind that canal used to be a field, which I think is now houses, and it was called Gallows Field. So they would take the miscreants when they were sentenced from the courts, from the Guild Hall, take them down Upper John Street, and then hang them up at Gallows Field. There weren't many of them. There they are. They handed out 15 death sentences, and that led to 9 executions on Gallows Field. Right, let's come back a bit more towards today. The assizes were very good in those areas where there was lower populations, but in areas like Liverpool and Manchester, they were a heathen lot up there and crime was rife. So they needed a court that would be standing 5-6 days a week, and that's exactly what they did. They put a Crown Court there in 1956, Liverpool on the left, Manchester on the right. Assizes went on in this country till 1972, and they were disbanded then for the magistrate, Crown, Royal and Supreme Courts that we have today. And of course, because of what I said earlier about different codes and different ways of doing things, Scotland and Northern Ireland are different. This is a mess, and it's meant to be a mess. When I started doing this talk in 2015, we had 367 magistrates' courts in the country, England and Wales that is, and 6 were in Staffordshire, Newcastle, Underline and Burton and Tamworth had disappeared, and just before lockdown so was Cannock. But when lockdown came along and there were no cases anywhere going through the magistrates' courts, there was a backlog. So now we've started back up again. They're using Cannock, the building that you all know and love in Wolverhampton Road in Cannock, up the top on the right there. But I think what will happen is that when they've got the bulk of those out of the way, then they'll think about closing Cannock as well, and they'll just be Stafford and Stoke. The magistrates' courts are where the vast majority of the criminal cases are heard, and some civil cases. So things like licences of pubs and gaming, family matters sometimes go to the magistrates' courts as well. And as I say, that's the building that you all know and love and that you've all been to, obviously just to get the licence that you require for your business. You've got a couple of Crown Courts, 77 in the country, Stafford and Stoke. The Crown Courts are heard where a judge and a 12-person jury dealing with serious crimes, robbery, rape, murder, fraud, grievous bodily harm, things like that. And that's the one in Stafford on the left at the bottom, and the one in Stoke. If somebody is deemed not to get a fair trial in the area where the court is, the Crown Court is, then by Act of Parliament, and I'll go into more about this, they can go to another Crown Court in the country, but originally they went to the Old Bailey in London. And that's the statue on top of the Old Bailey. Anybody know the name of the statue on top of the Old Bailey? Justice. Justice, yeah, that's one. Lady Justice, okay, is her actual name. She's gold-plated. She's got a sword in her right hand and the scales of justice on the left. Okay. A couple of higher courts. The Royal Courts of Justice in the Strand is the Court of Appeal, and that is a totally abused system. It is a money-making system, and it's disgusting. But anyway, enough said. And then the Supreme Court became the highest court in England, England and Wales, in 2009, after the House of Lords said, we don't want the House of Lords to be the highest court in the land, we want to separate it off. The sort of cases that you hear at the Supreme Court, and they do run 5 days a week at the Supreme Court, the last big one was the sort of propositions that were being put forward by the government that people were challenging about Brexit and things like that. So that's the sort of importance. So you're talking about core decisions made for the UK. And of course, there was a higher court in Europe, in Luxembourg, but of course now we've gone through Brexit, that's severed. A couple of specialist courts, a youth court. We've got 3 in Stafford, 154 in the country, 157. Youth courts, young offenders between 10 and 17 years of age. And I'm afraid because of knife crime, that is increasing. But specially trained magistrates handle the youth court cases. However, more serious cases can go to the Crown Court. There's the Coroner's Court, 2 in Staffordshire. And the coroner's a person whose standard role is to confirm and certify the death of an individual. The coroner may also conduct or order an inquest into the manner or cause of death and investigate or confirm the identity of an unknown person who's been found dead within his jurisdiction, his or her jurisdiction. Anybody know what else the coroner does? Anybody here from Hammerwich?
Yeah.
Well, back in 2009, some person dug up a bit of Hammerwich and found a lot of gold. So what the coroner does is he enacts the Treasure Act of 1996, and he makes sure that what the gold is worth gets sliced up and then portioned to the right people. So that lady was obviously on the digging, on the digging circuit. No. So, my lords and ladies, up to now, any disagreements, any questions? Right, so now you're bored stiff, okay? We'll move on to a bit more of the juicy bits, okay? Jail. Old French word? Well, before the Norman Conquest, we didn't have any jails. Weren't needed. If you had a punch up between two people and somebody died, so what? But that's as it was. The first jail in this country was Clink. And Clink, that's why we say, oh, he's gone to Clink, he's gone to jail, named after the first one. 1144, just south of London Bridge, in an area known as the Stews. It's a very, deprived, was a very deprived area, and slums and things like that. But it was administered by the Bishop of Westminster at Southwark Cathedral. Still is, he's the Bishop of Westminster, is still Southwark Cathedral. But he and his cohorts licensed the dock piers, because it's right on the side of the Thames, the warehouses, the pubs, the wash houses, the Winchester geese, residences and workplaces. Now, okay, some of those are dock piers, warehouses, yeah, residences, workplaces. The wash houses were there so that people that came off the ships, people in the local area, could go for a wash. But it's also a euphemism. It was a euphemism for a brothel. And the Winchester geese were the ladies that worked in the brothels, and they were all and everything was licensed by the Bishop of Winchester and his cohorts, and it went in their back pockets. It didn't go through the church. We know a little bit more about this. A bit later on, Charles Dickens' father John was incarcerated at Marshalsea prison. That's not there now, but it was about half a mile from Clink. For theft and death, he modelled Mr. Micawber from David Copperfield on his father. I don't think Charles liked his father. His father was a boozer, a gambler. They had had a lot of children, and he couldn't really afford them. They were in desperate straits, and it was only Charles's writings that really kept them afloat. And there's more in not just David Copperfield, but Dombey and Son and Little Dorrit, if you wish. I wouldn't say especially go to Clink, but to see what's there now. It is a tourist attraction, but if you're down in that area and you're near Borough Market and you want an hour, then yes, go down and have a look. It's not very pleasant down there. Back at Stafford, things were starting to get going after the lockups and houses of correction we'd had there since the Middle Ages. In 1793, the prison opened as the new Staffordshire Jail and developed through Victorian times, notably the main hall and the crescent wings. Now, I'll show you these in photographs coming up, but this one is one of the crescent wings. You can see it, it's a crescent, by the roof shaping with the curve on it, and you'll see a better picture. This bottom picture is the same building, but on the outside, and what you see from the road is your crooked Bridge Road, and then there's Jail Road that runs up the side. So it is a square brick building as you see it, but inside it is a crescent. And the Victorians really did very well. I don't say they all look like this, but some of the architecture within these buildings is beautiful. It really is. The present prison has been in continuous use since those 1793 days. It reopened after the outbreak of World War II as both a male and female prison It was used militarily between 1916 and 1914. It's also held young offenders in its time. Today, it's a closed training prison holding 751 male Category C sex offender prisoners. Right, closed training. That means that the people have gone to court, they've been sentenced, and they've been put into prison, in this case, Stafford. It holds 751. That's the official figure. When I was there, it was holding over 800, 802, 803. And how they squeezed them all in, I do not know. Category C means that the likelihood of escape is very low, and it really is. Since 2004, nobody else has escaped, and a long time before that, so we've had one in a long time. And then Jimmy Savile came along in 2010, 10-11, right? And that outed. The prisons and the courts as well. The courts were in a hell of a mess because they just didn't know how to handle the number of cases. How many cases do you reckon have been through the courts as a result of Jimmy Savile? Oh, 200? 300? Well, we're just coming up to 7,000. Right? It's about 6,900 and something, but it's not far off anyway. And of course there have been some notables that have gone through. That doesn't mean that every one of those has gone down, and it doesn't mean that there hasn't been more than one. When Rolf Harris was sent down, they say to him when he goes to court, have you any other people that you want to include within the cases that we're hearing? And if they say no, and they find another one, then they'll bring him back again and charge him with that and push it through the court system again. So it's very time consuming and extremely expensive. So that's the sex offenders. And because there was a great number of sex offenders that came out from that, Stafford Prison, Lay Hill in Gloucester, Newton Abbot, and one on the East Coast, which name escapes me at the moment, they were turned over solely for sex offender prisoners. And that's all the prisoners now that are in Stafford. And if things change in the near future, then they may change the usage of these prisoners, because some of these prisoners are going to pass on, and some of these prisoners are going to be coming out at the end of their term they will have served. So we'll see what happens.